You're too old to freeload. Get out and don't bother coming back. That was the last thing my parents said to me on Christmas Day. No tears.
No goodbye.
Just a suitcase by the door and silence. Hi, I'm Juniper. I spent years being their provider until the moment I became disposable. But just when I thought I'd lost everything, a woman I'd never met stepped in. My grandmother. A stranger. A legacy. And as it turned out, the owner of an entire Christmas tree empire. This isn't just a story about being thrown out. It's about finding out where you really belong. Have you ever been cut off by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments. What's your story of betrayal, survival, or unexpected redemption? Because mine started the day I got kicked out and ended in a crown of pine. Let me show you how it happened. You freeloaded long enough, Juniper. Get out and don't bother coming back. That was the line. Delivered not with fury or drama, but with a finality so casual it burned deeper than any shout could. My father's voice was calm, almost relieved. Merry damn Christmas. The kitchen was buzzing in that too bright fluorescent way, casting everything in cold light that made the dry meatloaf and canned green beans look even more miserable. I stood there still holding my keys, the paper bag with my own birthday cake crinkling in my hand, one candle missing from the plastic window on top. You're late, Dad added without looking up, already halfway through his whiskey. I set the cake down on the counter with more gentleness than it deserved. Stayed late at the office. Year-end reports.
My voice came out level. Practiced.
Mom didn't look up from her fork. She hadn't looked at me all evening. I hung my coat on the wall hook, each movement deliberate, my body operating on some detached autopilot. The room smelled of overcooked food, faint cleaning chemicals, and something older, regret, maybe. Dinner was quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but poisonous. Plates clinked, silverware scraped. No small talk, no questions. Certainly no, happy birthday. But I'd stopped expecting that years ago. Halfway through his plate, Dad set down his fork with a loud clatter. I knew what was coming before he spoke. Something about the air had shifted the moment I walked in. You're too old to be freeloading. His voice was flat, deliberate. Not a suggestion. A verdict. I glanced at Mom. She didn't even flinch. Eyes fixed on her plate like it held some cosmic truth. I pay the mortgage, I said quietly. Half of it. The electric. Groceries. Insurance. Dad let out a laugh. Short, cruel. A few bills doesn't buy you a lifetime stay, Princess.
Princess.
The same name he used when I was little, running to him with skin knees and glittery drawings. Now it tasted like mockery. The worst part wasn't the words. It was realizing how long they'd planned it. The suitcase already packed near the door. The sudden shift in tone. The way Mom couldn't meet my eyes. Today wasn't just my birthday. It was my expiration date. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. Got it, I said and stood. That was it. No shouting. No begging. No scene. Just the kind of quiet resolve that terrified people more than rage ever could. I walked past the counter where the cake sat untouched. One stupid red candle missing. Somehow, that felt appropriate. Upstairs, the suitcase they'd packed for me sat unzipped on my bed. They'd been bold enough to do it themselves. How thoughtful. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I simply opened my laptop and got to work. One by one, I canceled the auto payments. Electricity, water, gas, cable. All in my name. All gone. The silence of the house deepened with every click. This wasn't a tantrum. It was liberation. Years of being their safety net. Years of sacrificing my future for their convenience. Vacations skipped. Promotions declined. Friendships let go. And now I was disposable.
Good.
I transferred the rest of my savings into a private account. Closed the joint one mom insisted I keep for emergencies. Deleted their phone numbers. Canceled the car insurance covering both of their vehicles. By the time I zipped up the suitcase they'd so generously prepared, the house already felt like it belonged to strangers. I walked back downstairs, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. The living room glowed in blue TV light. Dad in his recliner, beer in hand. Mom on the edge of the couch, glassy-eyed. Neither looked up. "Don't forget to turn off the lights when you leave," Dad muttered. "You're not paying for them anymore." I paused, not because I was hurt, but because I wasn't. Not anymore. The house creaked behind me as I climbed the stairs for the last time. In my room, I looked around one final time. The stale air. The dusty carpet. The dent in the closet door from a fight I couldn't even remember. This house was never mine. I was just collateral. I picked up the small cake box, walked to the window, and opened it. The wind was biting, winter sneaking through the crack. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I dumped the cake out the window. Watched it splatter in the frost-covered garden below. Happy birthday, me. Later, I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence close in. For years, I had been the one to fix what they broke. The one who stayed. The one who believed family meant something. They taught me otherwise. I pulled out a notepad and wrote one word at the top. Freedom. Under it, I listed every account I'd cut, every obligation I'd severed. Not out of spite, out of survival. Downstairs, the heater hummed, probably for the last time. They thought they'd throw me away. What they didn't realize was this. I'd finally stopped giving. And that was the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. Funny how freeloader turns into family the moment the Wi-Fi cuts out. Tori said it without looking up from her cereal, spoon clinking against the chipped ceramic bowl. I sat hunched at the tiny kitchen table of her studio apartment, phone buzzing restlessly in my hand. Notifications stacked like bricks, missed calls, voicemails, and now a public Facebook post that made my blood run cold. My father had weaponized the internet. In a town like Ridgeville, all it took was one dramatic post in the community group, and suddenly you weren't just a person. You were a cautionary tale. Dad's words were theatrical. Some daughters drain your wallet. Mine drained our hearts. On Christmas, no less. Pray for us. Attached was a photo of him and Delilah, carefully staged in their dim living room, looking sad, sickly, and somehow angelic. I read the caption 3 times before locking the screen and placing the phone face down. My stomach curled inward, not from guilt, but from the bone-deep nausea of being gaslit publicly by the people who trained me to apologize for my existence. Tori glanced at me, her spoon hovering. "Tell me you didn't just let that slide." "They'll just spin whatever I say," I muttered. "Make me sound hysterical. Or worse, ungrateful. Then don't speak, show. Let the silence scream." Her voice wasn't loud, but it cracked something open in me. By noon, I had my laptop open, documents spread across Tori's table like a battlefield. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted a chipped mug of coffee to my lips, stone cold. I didn't care. The tremble wasn't fear anymore. It was the hum of something igniting. Years of invoices, bank transfers, insurance payments. Email threads from Delilah asking for help, new tires, medical copays, even one begging for a loan to cover a missed mortgage payment. Always framed sweetly, always followed by, "You're such a blessing, Junie." I opened a blank social post and started uploading receipts. Each file I added felt like peeling off another layer of shame. I wasn't the villain. I was the infrastructure. And they dismantled me without even flipping a switch. The caption I wrote was short. They didn't just lose a daughter. They lost their lights, water, and Wi-Fi. And they earned that silence. I hovered over the post button. Tori noticed. You okay? I nodded once. Then clicked. At first, it was a trickle, likes, comments, a few shocked emojis. Then came the comments. I always wondered how they afforded that truck. She shoveled their driveway during a blizzard once, while they watched from inside. She fixed my brakes in college when my own mom said no. Tori pulled her chair closer, her tone low and sharp. You're going to get backlash. But you already survived worse than a comment section. I didn't answer. I was watching the post grow legs, reshared by a friend from high school, then a local teacher, then a woman I didn't even know who captioned it. This is what financial abuse looks like. An hour later, someone sent me a screenshot. My story had become a TikTok. Just screenshots of my posts layered over dramatic piano music. It had over 90,000 views. Another message popped up from a local account named @RidgevilleWatcher. This is why we don't stay out of family drama. Delilah tried to call twice. Then, once more using a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer, but her voicemail played anyway. Juniper, honey, there must be a misunderstanding. Your father didn't mean to. This is getting out of hand.
Please call me.
We're still family.
Still family.
The audacity. Have you ever been publicly shamed by the very people who raised you, just to protect their image? That quiet kind of betrayal that feels more brutal than any slap. If you felt that sting, leave a comment number 7 below. Let's see what happened when the silence finally screamed. Tori leaned back with a slow exhale. They're not scared of what you did. They're scared people now see who they are without your silence to cover them. They don't miss me, I said. They miss what I did for them.
Exactly.
So keep showing them what life without you looks like. I added more screenshots. The electric bills, dated and in my name. Insurance records, bank statements. One in particular made Tori whistle, a heartfelt email from Delilah. I don't know how we'd survive without you. Apparently, they were about to find out. An anonymous user commented under the post with a blurry photo. It showed me at 16, lugging 2 jugs of water through snow to the house. I hadn't seen that image in years. It sent a chill up my spine. The caption read, "We knew. We just didn't speak." I stared at it for a long time. Then another comment caught my eye from a name I didn't recognize. Eli Yule. She's not just brave. She's the missing branch they tried to prune. I blinked. That name meant nothing to me, but something in my gut twisted.
Yule.
Like Christmas trees? I tried to shake the unease, but it only deepened when I opened my inbox and saw the message. From Margaret Yule. Subject: I believe you. I think it's time we spoke. No body text. Just a number. And one sentence. You deserve to know where you come from. You're not the first Wells they tried to erase, but you'll be the last. The voice on the other end of the phone was older, deliberate, and smooth like lacquered wood. But beneath it, I heard steel. Margaret Yule didn't sound like someone surprised by my story. She sounded like someone who had waited years for me to figure it out. I met her 3 days later at a Christmas tree farm on the outskirts of Ridgeville. It stretched beyond the tree line, dozens of acres of symmetrical green rows dusted with fresh snow. And at the center of it all, a large 2-story lodge with warm amber lights, rustic wooden signs, and a faint smell of pine and caramelized sugar drifting in the air. A sign above the entrance read, Yule Empire, grown with love since 1958. I hesitated outside the door, fingers twitching at my coat zipper. I wasn't sure what I expected, a scam, a setup, some cruel trick orchestrated by Delilah. But nothing about this place screamed trap. It screamed roots. The door opened before I knocked. Juniper Elise Wells, the woman said, her voice softer than the one on the phone. You have her eyes. She wasn't what I expected. Margaret Yule wore black slacks and a red wool coat, silver hair twisted neatly at her nape. Her face was lined with age, but there was strength in her posture, elegance in the way she extended her hand like we were already equals. How do you know my middle name? I asked, half-dazed as she led me into the office. I gave it to you. I stopped mid-step. She gestured to the armchair across from a crackling fireplace, where a tray of peppermint tea and cranberry scones waited. Sit, Juniper. We've got a truth to excavate. I learned more in that hour than in 28 years with Harvey and Delilah. Margaret Yule was my grandmother, not just biologically. She had raised Harvey before he erased her. She pulled out a photo album with yellowed pages. In one picture, a boy who looked unsettlingly like my father stood beside a teenage girl holding a baby. Everyone wore red flannel. The caption read, Yule Family, 1986, Ridgeville Festival. I never stopped writing to him, Margaret said. But he stopped answering the day he met Delilah. Said she had bigger dreams than tree sap and holiday stalls. Said we embarrassed him. He never once mentioned you. I know. That was the point. My throat felt tight. I stared at a photo of Margaret in her 20s, standing beside a stall full of wreaths, with a banner above that said, Generations of Giving. I remembered something from years ago, Delilah mocking those pathetic tree farmers who overcharged during the holidays. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now it felt like a warning. Why reach out now? I asked. Because the whole town's watching you, she said simply. And you're standing in the middle of a storm they started years ago. You deserve an umbrella, at least. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, legal documents bearing her signature, naming me sole beneficiary to the Yule estate. There was a handwritten letter, too, dated 7 years prior. She'd written it for my 23rd birthday. It had never reached me. They didn't just cut you off, Juniper. They cut you out. Later that day, I stood beside Margaret at the Ridgeville Town Square. The local Christmas festival was in full swing, snowman contests, booths selling jam, children giggling over caramel apples. In the center of the square was a stage usually reserved for church choirs and small-town mayors. Tonight, Harvey was supposed to speak. He never got the chance. Margaret stepped onto the platform with quiet authority. Her red coat gleamed under the stage lights. She gestured for me to join her. Cameras flashed. I could hear whispers rippling through the crowd. My name is Margaret Yule, she said into the mic. Some of you know me. Many don't. But you all know my family's name, because every December, you take one of our trees home. What you didn't know was that I had a granddaughter, one I've never met until this week. She turned to me. Her voice softened. Juniper didn't just survive what was done to her. She rebuilt herself from the very ashes her parents thought they'd buried her in. That kind of fire doesn't destroy, it creates. I looked out into the crowd. Some people gasped. A few turned to whisper. But others, especially older townsfolk, nodded slowly, like a missing piece had just clicked into place. In the back, I spotted Delilah frozen near the cider stand, face pale, cup trembling. She wasn't holding it together as well as she wanted the town to think. After the speech, Margaret didn't linger. She pressed a small wooden box into my hands. I kept this for you, she said. Your father tried to throw it out when he left. Inside was a bracelet. Tiny pine tree charms dangled from it, some missing paint. I remembered it vaguely. I'd worn it once, until Delilah said it looked cheap. It's silly, I murmured. No, Margaret said. It's heritage. That night, I lay on Tori's couch, the bracelet beside me, the town's Facebook group exploding with whispers and video clips of Margaret's speech. Comment after comment rolled in. I remember when Harvey stormed out of her will. Thought she was bluffing. Didn't Juniper pay for their heating a few winters back? About time someone shined a light on what they did to that girl. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was being seen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth. If they wanted a courtroom drama, I was ready to give them a holiday special they'd never forget. The official notice arrived on a cloudy Thursday morning, tucked inside a plain manila envelope delivered by a deputy who looked more uncomfortable than I did. He didn't make eye contact as he handed it over, just cleared his throat and said, "You've been served, Ms. Wells." Inside were 5 pages of legal theater. Harvey and Delilah were suing me. The charges? Emotional elder abuse, financial abandonment, theft of family resources. The irony would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so cruel. I stared at the documents, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from sheer disbelief. They had the audacity to spin a narrative where I, the person who paid their bills, drove them to appointments, and kept the roof over their heads, was now being painted as some manipulative grifter. Tori looked up from her laptop across the kitchen table. "You okay?" I handed her the packet. She skimmed it, eyebrows rising with every paragraph. "They're trying to kill you with fiction," she muttered. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said. "This is war." That afternoon, I called legal aid in Columbus. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I told the paralegal everything, calmly, methodically, like I was filing taxes. Every bill I'd paid. Every transfer. Every forgotten emergency they dumped in my lap. She listened quietly, then asked, "Do you have proof?" "Folder's been ready since the day they threw me out," I said. "Then we'll counter. And frankly, you should have sued first." By the next morning, I was sitting in a glass-walled office across from Miss Keene, young, sharp, and precise in speech like a scalpel. She didn't waste time. "They're trying to make this a morality play," she said, flipping through the paperwork. "But in court, we deal in facts." She held up one of my printed bank statements. "You covered 4 years of mortgage payments. That's not elder abuse. That's subsidized survival. We filed a countersuit the same day. Financial coercion, negligent exploitation, defamation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Have you ever had to fight for your truth, not to get even, but to take your life back? That moment when survival becomes power. If you've ever been there, drop a comment number 9 below. Now, let's see how the court turned the lies against them. 2 weeks later, we walked into the Ridgeville Civil Court. Small courtroom, wood-paneled walls, folding chairs, a buzzing fluorescent light above the clerk's desk. Harvey and Delilah sat on the far side of the room. He looked bloated and bitter in a wrinkled sports coat. She wore sunglasses indoors and dabbed her eyes with a tissue before the judge had even spoken. Harvey stood first. "My daughter," he began, voice theatrical, "turned her back on us when we needed her most. After everything we sacrificed for her, college, shelter, unconditional love, she abandoned us." Ms. Keene leaned over and whispered, "He should have gone into politics." Delilah sniffled loudly, leaning into the role of wounded matriarch. Her voice trembled. "We never asked for much.
Just a little respect.
Just to be remembered." The judge nodded. Then it was our turn. Ms. Keene rose slowly, heels clicking like punctuation. "Your Honor," she said, "what the plaintiffs have conveniently left out is that for over a decade, my client paid not just her share of household expenses, but theirs. She paid utility bills in her name, transferred money into their accounts, covered vehicle insurance, and provided medical assistance without reimbursement. She slid a stack of printed documents across the table. These aren't claims. They're facts. They have timestamps. I watched Harvey's expression shift from smug to stone. Keene continued, voice steady. My client didn't abandon her parents. She emancipated herself from an arrangement that financially crippled her and emotionally minimized her value. Delilah opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Then Keene delivered the final blow. We also submit, for the record, a signed affidavit from a third party, Margaret Yule, who witnessed repeated attempts by the plaintiffs to isolate Ms. Wells from family assets and erase her inheritance. This wasn't about care. This was about control. The courtroom fell into silence. From the gallery, a local blogger scribbled furiously into a notepad. I saw two neighbors whispering. My high school history teacher sat in the back, arms folded, nodding faintly. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen. After the hearing, I stepped outside into the winter air, lungs burning with something between clarity and exhaustion. Tori was waiting near the courthouse steps. Well, she asked.
They're losing, I said.
And they know it. Delilah brushed past us on the sidewalk, still wearing the oversized sunglasses. She didn't say a word, but the side of her mouth twitched, like she'd tasted something rotten. Harvey trailed behind, red-faced and muttering to himself, nearly knocking into a trash bin on his way to the car. They looked small, not defeated, but diminished. Ms. Keene caught up to us, handing me a fresh copy of the court documents. We'll finalize the injunction next week. After that, they'll be legally blocked from contacting you directly. I exhaled through my teeth.
They won't stop, I said.
Not really. She tilted her head. Maybe not, but they'll have to shout from the sidelines now. That night, I sat in Tori's apartment with a warm blanket and a list of contacts in my phone. One by one, I deleted them, extended family who hadn't reached out in years suddenly deciding I owed them explanations. Cousins who reposted Harvey's sob stories but ignored my receipts. Coworkers who sent me links to gossip threads but never asked if I was okay.
Gone.
For the first time in years, my contact list belonged only to people who loved me for me. Not for what I could provide. Not for what I could sacrifice. Just me. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after the courtroom dust settles. Not relief. Not victory. Something quieter. Like the moment before a match hits gasoline. I stood backstage at the Columbus Trade and Development Hall, adjusting the lapel of my red blazer. The color Margaret said reminded her of power and pine. She was right. I didn't feel like a girl walking into her first board meeting. I felt like the storm that follows the thunder. Beyond the curtain, the murmurs of a gathering crowd rose and fell like ocean waves. Soft music floated through the speakers, and the scent of polished wood and pine sap clung to the air. Spotlights blinked in rhythm, casting a faint blue glow behind the stage. I inhaled deeply. My palms were steady, my spine straight. No fear, just readiness. Tori stood behind me, trying not to bounce her leg. You good? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied. That's when I saw her. Delilah. She wasn't supposed to be here. She emerged from the side entrance like a memory, trying to look relevant. Navy coat, salon curls, and a paper-thin smile stretched too tight. In her hand, a gift bag. Probably staged. Definitely manipulative. I just wanted a moment, she said, eyes scanning mine. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, anyway. You look strong. I guess that's thanks to her, she added, glancing toward the curtain, where Margaret waited in the front row. She reached into the bag and pulled out an envelope. It's just a letter. Nothing else. Just some things I needed to say. I stared at it unmoved. Didn't reach for it. We were a family, Juniper. No, I said, voice like glass. We were a contract, and it expired. I turned away. Wait, please, she said, catching the edge of my sleeve. You've done something incredible. Maybe we could start fresh. Rebuild. As a family. I smiled without warmth. I already rebuilt. Without you. I reached into my folder and handed her a copy of the finalized disassociation paperwork, the legal severance of all financial and familial ties. She took it with hands that had stopped trembling but not shaking. Her gaze drifted to the logo printed next to my name. Something in her posture sagged. You're really going to run this place? She asked, barely above a whisper. No, I said. I'm going to grow it. She stood frozen as I walked past her and stepped toward the curtain. Just before stepping out, I placed my palm gently on a massive pine tree placed near the entry of the stage, a towering symbol of the empire. My fingers traced the curve of one ornament, a faint pulse of childhood flickering inside me. Once, Delilah wouldn't even let me decorate. That's not for you, she had said when I was 7. Now I own the whole forest. Lights shifted. Music faded. My name was called. I stepped onto the stage. Applause began, scattered at first, then building. The room was full, investors, partners, townspeople, media. Some curious. Some skeptical. Some with phones already recording. Good evening, I said, my voice firm. My name is Juniper Wells. I was born invisible, but today I lead one of the most recognized names in seasonal agriculture. A few raised eyebrows. A chuckle from the middle row. Margaret sat in the front, hands folded in her lap, eyes glistening with quiet pride. I didn't get here through inheritance. I continued. I got here because I refused to be forgotten. The screen behind me lit up, launching into the presentation, slides of modernization plans, market projections, outreach campaigns. I didn't read from notes. I spoke from lived experience. Slide by slide, I laid out the new direction: digital ordering systems, employee wellness programs, carbon-neutral packaging. A portion of all proceeds would go towards single-parent housing support. There was a shift in the room. Energy rising like sap through a trunk. Skepticism turning to curiosity. Then respect. The final slide was simple. A white background with one sentence in black. Legacy isn't about blood. It's about purpose. Silence held the room for a heartbeat. Then, thunderous applause. Margaret rose first. Then others followed, vendors, farmers, donors. In the corner of the room, a longtime supplier leaned toward his neighbor and muttered just loud enough for me to catch. She tried to buy her way in last year. Glad you're the one holding the keys now. I smiled, not at him, but at the truth behind the words. At the far end of the room, Delilah lingered just inside the doors, half in the shadows. She didn't clap. Her eyes, rimmed with disbelief, watched me as if I were something unrecognizable. And maybe I was. Afterward, a tall man in a charcoal suit approached me with a sharp handshake. Impressive, he said. We've been watching the transition. You've got grit and vision. Let's talk investment. Behind him, another older vendor nodded as he passed me by. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. The real one.
It hit me then.
Not pride. Not triumph. Belonging. Later that evening, back in the office Margaret once ruled, I walked past the fireplace and into the heart of the room. Everything smelled of cedar and old ink. My name was freshly etched on the glass door. On her desk was a rolled-up blueprint, plans for expanding to the West Coast. Next to it, a small yellow sticky note with her neat, looping handwriting. Will you expand beyond your pain? Or just rule over it? I looked around the room once more. The desk, the chair, the window that overlooked acres of snow-dusted green. I slid the note into my pocket and whispered to the air, "I think I'll do both." The day I signed the final papers, snow was falling in Ridgeville. Not the dramatic kind that blankets streets in chaos. No, this snow was soft, slow, like the town was exhaling with me, letting go of something stale. Margaret had insisted we finalize the trust transfer at the original Yule homestead, a rustic two-story house just off Maple Ridge Road, now converted into a heritage office. I pulled into the gravel driveway, half expecting to see the ghost of my younger self lugging cords of firewood or dragging a sled with pine garlands tied to the sides. Inside, the room smelled of old wood and warm cider. Legal documents waited on the table, paper crisp, weighty with legacy. "Ready?" Margaret asked. She didn't wear red this time, just a deep green shawl draped over her shoulders, like she carried the forest with her. Her eyes were calm, but there was something tight behind them. Not sadness. Anticipation. I nodded. With a single stroke of ink, the Yule name, its assets, lands, legacy belonged to me. My hands didn't tremble. Afterwards, she handed me a small key. "Top drawer," she said, nodding toward the cedar desk behind her. I opened it and found a flash drive nestled inside a felt pouch. No label, no decoration, just data. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Know what?" "What they did, what they took from me, and, by extension, from you." I stared at the drive. "I never wanted you to grow up seeing Harvey as a villain. He wasn't always. But he chose his path, and Delilah carved it deeper." I slipped the drive into my pocket. Later that evening, back in my apartment above the newly renovated Yule office, I opened the files. It was all there. Letters Harvey had sent in college, full of warmth and plans for the business. Then the change, how Delilah pushed for independence, how she convinced him Margaret was holding him back. Voice memos. Scanned pages from journals. Photos of me as a toddler. Ones I'd never seen. My first Christmas. My hand clutching a pine cone. Margaret's handwriting. Junie's first tree. The camera lens had captured something pure. A version of me before the fractures. And then hospital bills. It was all there, Margaret's financial support when I was sick as a child, completely hidden by my parents. Letters returned unopened. Checks torn in half. I leaned back in my chair, wind rattling against the window pane. For a moment, I didn't feel rage or grief. I felt clarity. They hadn't just erased Margaret. They'd stolen parts of me to do it. The next morning, I made a call to Cody Trent. He answered on the third ring. "Juniper? Wow, hey. Long time." "Cody," I said, "you once told me you wished things were different. That you didn't know everything Harvey and Delilah were doing." "I remember," he said quietly. "I need you to back that up." Silence stretched. "I'm not asking you to choose sides," I added. "I'm asking you to stand by the truth." He agreed to meet me 2 hours later at the Ridgeville Community Center. Tori came with me, phone fully charged, camera ready. Cody looked nervous, but firm. We sat under the mural of the town's founding, paint flaking, but proud. He gave a statement. On video. He talked about the manipulation, the pressure from Harvey, how Delilah blackmailed relatives with secrets and guilt. He confessed to altering dates on financial logs at Harvey's request. He even admitted to hiding Margaret's gifts meant for me over the years. When he was done, he asked, "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "I hate what they made you do." The video went live that evening. I didn't add commentary. Just posted it with the caption, "The truth speaks for itself." And it did. Comments flooded in. The town split for a moment, then started to realign. The next morning, I received an anonymous email. One sentence, They're preparing to leave town. No forwarding address.
I didn't respond.
I didn't care where they went. They'd finally lost their stage. 2 days later, I hosted the first community event under the Yule Foundation. Free trees for families in need. A fundraiser for a new children's literacy program. Margaret sat near the fire pit, cocoa in hand, nodding along as Tori read The Giving Tree to a circle of bundled-up kids. I wandered through the rows of evergreens strung with lights. Each one had a tag, a handwritten wish from a child or parent. One read, "I hope our heater works this winter." Another, "I hope my mom stops crying when the lights go out." I tied a red ribbon to that one, then added a silent wish of my own, that no one would ever have to buy love with silence again. As the sky turned soft with twilight, Margaret joined me under the largest tree. "Do you remember your first Christmas?" she asked. "I remember the cold, but not much else." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small ornament. It was the same pine cone from the photo, now painted gold, with tiny flecks of green glitter. "I kept it," she said, "even when I thought I'd never see you again." I took it, fingers curling around the rough ridges. And then, for the first time in years, I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I wasn't anymore. As the crowd began singing quietly beneath the stars, I stood beside Margaret and whispered, "It ends here." She looked at me, smile soft and knowing. "No, Juniper. It begins here." I stepped out of the storm not just with my name restored, but with a new life, one where I no longer had to beg for love or trade away my worth for silence. Now I live in the light of truth, freedom, and dignity, the very things they tried so hard to strip from me. I've learned that kindness, when misplaced, becomes a chain. And no one, not even family, has the right to call you a burden when you are the one holding the house together. Karma doesn't need revenge. It only needs the truth. Have you ever stood at the crossroads between loyalty and self-preservation? Have you ever had to choose yourself over the people who were supposed to protect you? If this story touched something in you, share your experience or reflections in the comments. Your voice might just be the shelter someone else is searching for. And if you've ever been hurt by the very people who are meant to love you, remember, you are not alone.